My name is Wendy Moore, and I'm 29 years old. For the longest time, I believed my life was enough. Not flashy, not remarkable, just steady. I worked as a network administrator, a job that kept the lights on and food in the fridge. My schedule was predictable, stable hours, good pay, health insurance. It wasn't exciting, but it gave me the kind of quiet comfort I thought everyone secretly wanted. For 5 years, I shared that life with Daniel. To me, we were a team. We had our little rituals, lazy Sunday mornings with coffee evenings, where I'd lose myself in cooking elaborate meals just to see him smile. He always said my lasagna was the highlight of his week. We had inside jokes no one else would understand, shared silences that felt warm instead of awkward. I thought we were happy. I thought he was happy. But love doesn't vanish overnight. It erodes slowly like water carving into stone. The first cracks began when Daniel reconnected with an old college friend. Suddenly, our quiet nights in were replaced by invitations to gallery openings, rooftop parties, and noisy warehouse gatherings filled with people who spoke in riddles about artistic freedom and living untethered. I tried to keep up at first, smiling, nodding, even asking questions. But inside, I felt like an outsider intruding on a world that didn't belong to me. Daniel, meanwhile, seemed intoxicated by it all. He'd come home buzzing, rambling about seizing the moment and breaking routines. One night, he looked at me across the dinner table, his eyes sharper than I remembered. "Wendy, don't you ever want more than this?" he asked, his tone half curious, half accusing. I blinked, unsure how to respond. More debt, more instability, more loneliness in crowded rooms. I told him softly, "I'm happy. Isn't that enough?" He sighed dismissively, already reaching for his phone. That was the first time I felt the distance between us, a gap so subtle it almost didn't exist, but wide enough to let in a draft of cold air. The breaking point came at one of those parties. A repurposed warehouse exposed brick, harsh lighting music that rattled my chest instead of lifting my spirit. Daniel was in his element, drifting between clusters of artists, laughing too loudly, throwing his arm around people I'd never met. I lingered near the drinks table, clutching a cup of warm beer, trying to ground myself. A man wearing a scarf indoors cornered me, rambling about a performance piece involving fire and silence. I nodded politely, but my eyes searched the room for Daniel. When I spotted him, he was striding toward me, his face set with something between frustration and pity. Relief flooded me at first. Maybe he'd noticed how out of place I felt, maybe he'd rescue me. Instead, he grabbed my wrist and pulled me into a dim hallway away from the crowd. "What's wrong?" I asked, startled. His face was inches from mine, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the pounding bass. "I can't believe you're just standing there like that," he hissed, smiling like some awkward child. "Do you know how embarrassing that is?" The words didn't land at first. They hovered suspended in the air between us, waiting to pierce. I forced a small laugh, thinking I'd misheard him. "Daniel, I'm just trying to take it all in. It's a lot." "No," he snapped, his eyes filled with contempt I had never seen before. "You don't get it. You don't fit. You don't belong here. Look around. These are real people with passion, with drive. And you're just boring, safe, predictable, an embarrassment to be seen with." There it was, the knife delivered with precision. My smile crumbled. I felt my stomach twist into knots, my heart pounding against my ribs as if trying to escape. My throat closed up, words lodged behind a wall of disbelief. I stared at him, my Daniel, the man I had loved for half a decade, as though he'd turned into a stranger before my very eyes. He didn't wait for me to respond. With a dismissive shake of his head, he released my wrist and walked back into the blaring chaos, leaving me stranded in that narrow hallway, small and trembling. The music thumped on, indifferent. But for me, something inside had shattered, and I knew deep down, though I couldn't admit it yet, that our story was already ending. The ride home from that warehouse party was suffocating. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel, his eyes fixed on the dark road ahead, his jaw tight. I sat in silence, staring out the window, the echo of his words pounding in my chest, an embarrassment to be seen with. We didn't speak, not once. The silence wasn't the comfortable kind that used to wrap around us after long days. It was heavy, hostile, like sitting in the middle of a storm without the sound of rain to break the tension. When we got home, Daniel went straight into the bedroom, closing the door with a soft but deliberate click. I stayed in the living room, still wearing my jacket, staring at the shadows dancing across the wall from the streetlight outside. I wanted to cry, to scream, to demand an explanation. But nothing came out, just silence. The next morning, he was already at the kitchen table when I walked in, a mug of coffee in his hand, a suitcase beside his chair. My stomach dropped. "Wendy," he began, his voice calm, too calm, like he'd rehearsed this. "I've been thinking, I don't think we're right for each other anymore." The words landed like glass, shattering on tile. My breath caught, but I kept my face still. "What do you mean?" My voice was steady, though I felt a tremor underneath. He looked at me with a detached kind of pity. "You're content with this life, and that's fine for you. But I can't stay stuck. I need passion. I need to grow, to live. And you—" He gestured vaguely around the apartment. "You're too comfortable, too predictable. It's suffocating." I blinked back tears, forcing myself not to break. "Is this about her?" I asked finally, my throat tight. His eyebrows twitched. "Who?" Sophia Wari said the name, tasting bitter. His new friend, the artist he'd been seeing almost daily. "Don't lie to me." His lips curled into something between a smirk and a scoff. "This isn't about Sophia. This is about me. I've changed, Wendy. My priorities have shifted. You should understand that." Understand. My mind screamed at the hypocrisy, but I swallowed the rage. Instead, I asked, "So what happens now?" Daniel leaned back, sipping his coffee with maddening serenity. "You'll find someone else. Someone who wants what you want. Predictability, routine. That's just not me anymore." My chest tightened, but my voice remained calm. "After 5 years, this is all I get. A lecture about how I bore you." He didn't answer. Instead, he set his mug down and walked into the bedroom. Moments later, he returned with a half-empty suitcase, the zipper straining against the edges. Something in me broke then, not in the way he expected, but in the opposite. A strange clarity washed over me. I realized begging wouldn't change his mind. Anger wouldn't make him stay. He had already left me long before this morning. So I did the only thing I could to protect what little dignity I had left. I walked to the closet, pulled out an old duffel bag, and started packing. A few clothes, my laptop, some books. My hands trembled, but I moved quickly, deliberately. Daniel froze, watching me. His eyes widened slightly, as if this wasn't the reaction he'd been expecting. "You're leaving?" he asked, disbelief flickering across his face. "Yes," I said simply. My voice was quiet but steady, the kind of tone that comes when pain turns into steel. He didn't stop me. Maybe he thought I'd come crawling back. Maybe he was too arrogant to imagine I could walk away without a fight. By noon, I was standing at my sister Marisol's doorstep, duffel bag slung over my shoulder. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me into her arms and whispered, "You're home now." And just like that, the life I had built for 5 years was gone. All that was left behind was silence, betrayal, and the faint echo of a man who once loved me telling me I was an embarrassment. But I didn't cry. Not yet. That part would come later in the dark when no one was watching. For now, I just let Marisol's embrace hold me up as I wondered what version of myself would rise from these ruins. The first night on Marisol's couch felt like sleeping in a stranger's skin. The cushions were soft, the blanket warm, but my body ached in ways comfort couldn't touch. Every time I closed my eyes, Daniel's words echoed back, "You're an embarrassment to be seen with." They circled my mind like vultures tearing at whatever scraps of self-worth I had left. Marisol never pressed me for details. She simply left a cup of tea on the coffee table each evening, and sometimes a gentle hand on my shoulder. She knew I needed space more than I needed questions. For that, I was grateful. Days blurred into nights. I worked, I ate, I existed, but nothing filled the hollow where Daniel's presence used to be. The silence was unbearable at first, so loud it rattled inside my head. I blocked his number, erased him from every social media feed, even logged out of accounts we had once shared. I wanted him gone, not just from my phone, but from my world. And yet the quiet was deceptive. It suffocated me at first, then slowly began to breathe life back into me. One evening, Marisol came home to find me in the kitchen. The oven light glowed, and inside was my lasagna, the one Daniel used to rave about. When it was ready, I sat down alone, slicing into the golden bubbling top. The taste was the same, but it carried no joy, no laughter, echoing from across the table. Each bite was heavy, like chewing on memories that no longer belonged to me. I pushed the plate away and whispered into the empty kitchen, never again, for him. Cooking once our shared ritual would become mine alone. Not a love language for someone else to dismiss, but a comfort I could reclaim for myself. Weeks passed, and with them came a small shift. I found a tiny one-bedroom apartment near my office. It was nothing grand peeling paint in the bathroom creaky floorboards, but it was mine. On the first night, I lay on the new gray sofa I'd picked out myself, surrounded by unopened boxes. The space smelled faintly of cardboard and fresh paint. It didn't feel like home yet, but it felt like possibility. I set up my computer in the corner, something I hadn't touched in months. I cooked a simple meal roast chicken with garlic and ate it in silence, but this silence felt different. Not suffocating, not hostile, just mine. The hollow inside me hadn't disappeared, but piece by piece I was filling it with fragments of a life that belonged only to me. Then the outside world began to intrude. A text arrived from Chris, a mutual friend. "Hey Wendy, I know things ended badly with Daniel, but I thought you should know some stuff's going on with him." I stared at the screen, heart thumping. For a long moment I hovered over the message, debating whether to open the door to his name again. But curiosity cracked the armor I had built. Chris's next text came through before I replied. "It's about Sophia. Things aren't what they seemed." I set the phone down. My breath shallow. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something besides grief. Something sharp and uneasy. Maybe Daniel's perfect new world wasn't so perfect after all. Chris's message gnawed at me all night. I didn't reply, but I couldn't shake it either. By morning, another ping lit up my phone, this time a voicemail. "Wendy, I just thought you should know. Daniel's not doing so great." Sophia. She walked out. Apparently, he wasn't who he said he was. I didn't need the details to know Chris was telling the truth. Something in my gut had sensed it all along. Daniel was chasing a life built on smoke. But the details came anyway. Sophia wasn't just his muse, she was his mirror, and she shattered it. She exposed him for what he was, a pretender. A trust fund man playing at being an artist, leeching off her circle until they saw through him. His friends drifted away as quickly as they had appeared. For weeks I listened silently as pieces of Daniel's downfall trickled into my orbit. Each message, each phone call from people I hadn't heard from in months carried the same undercurrent of shock. We thought he had it all. Turns out he had nothing. Lisa, another mutual friend, even called me directly. Her voice was tight, almost ashamed. "Wendy, I owe you an apology. When you two split, I believed his version of the story. That you were holding him back. That you were small." Her pause crackled through the line. But now I see he was just running from himself. He's lost everything. And I mean everything. I listened, my lips pressed thin. There was a time I would have craved those words, vindication proof that I hadn't been the problem. But hearing them now, I felt nothing. No triumph, no joy, just a quiet, detached emptiness. Then the attempts to reach me began. First, an unfamiliar number. "Wendy, it's me. Please just hear me out." I blocked it. Then another. "I know I hurt you. Sophia was a mistake. She ruined me." Blocked. Finally, Daniel's desperation took shape in the voices of others. Chris texted again, exhausted. "He won't stop talking about you. Says he wants you back. I don't know what to tell him anymore." My reply was a single word, no. The strangest part wasn't his persistence, it was my indifference. Months earlier, I would have collapsed at the sound of his name. Now, his voice barely stirred me. The same man who once defined my days was reduced to background noise I refused to turn up. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't something haunting about it all, knowing he was unraveling while I was slowly, quietly stitching myself back together. There was one night, though, when I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and whispered almost accusingly, "Why don't you feel anything?" I searched my own eyes, waiting for guilt or compassion to rise up. Instead, I saw a woman who had finally understood that not every wound needs closure. Some wounds simply close themselves with time, leaving scars you learn to wear. Still, a part of me braced for the inevitable. Daniel wasn't the type to let go easily. And if there was one thing I'd learned in 5 years with him, it was this. When his world collapsed, he would come crawling back to mine. And sooner or later he did. It was a quiet Sunday evening. My apartment smelled of roasted garlic and thyme, a simple chicken I had cooked just for myself. The windows were cracked open to let in the autumn air, and for the first time in months, I felt at peace in the stillness. Then 3 sharp knocks. I froze. No one ever came by unannounced. My friends knew better, and Marisol always called first. Slowly, I walked to the door, heart tightening, with a strange mix of dread and inevitability. When I opened it, there he was. Daniel, but not the Daniel I remembered. His clothes were wrinkled, his hair unkempt, his eyes hollow and bloodshot. The arrogant posture that once defined him was gone. In its place stood a man collapsed under his own mistakes. "Wendy," he breathed, his voice breaking. "Thank God you're here. I've been trying to reach you. I didn't move, didn't step aside. The smell of smoke and stale alcohol clung to him, invading the warm air of my doorway. Please, he begged, his hands trembling. I made a mistake. Sophia. She used me. She destroyed everything. But you were real. You loved me when no one else did. I see that now. The words fell between us like ash. Once they would have melted me. Now they only confirmed what I already knew. His love had been conditional, fleeting, selfish. I stepped back just enough for him to push his way inside. His eyes darted around my small apartment, taking in the new sofa, the tidy kitchen, the humming computer in the corner. Confusion flickered across his face, as though he couldn't reconcile this space with the woman he had once dismissed. This is nice, he muttered, almost resentful. Then louder, more desperate, Wendy. I need you. I miss us. I miss the way you took care of me. I stood in the center of the room, arms crossed, the calm in my chest, surprising even me. Daniel, I said evenly, why are you here? His mask cracked. Anger flickered beneath the desperation. Because you're supposed to forgive me. We were partners. You can't just throw that away. His voice cracked. I know I hurt you, but I was lost. Can't you see that? I shook my head slowly. What I see is a man who chose his path. You wanted more than me, remember? More excitement, more risk. Well, you got it. He stepped closer, tears streaking his face. Wendy, please, don't be so cold. I'm begging you. And then the memory surged back with sharp clarity, his sneer in that warehouse hallway, his voice dripping with contempt. You're an embarrassment to be seen with. I met his eyes steady and unflinching. You were right, Daniel. I was an embarrassment. And you wanted someone bigger, brighter, louder. You found her, and you lost her. That's not my burden to carry. His shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. He looked small, diminished. I can change, he whispered. No, I said firmly. You won't. And even if you could, I wouldn't want you back. My life is peaceful now. It's mine. And you don't belong in it anymore. I walked to the door, pulled it open, and gestured outward. My face betrayed no anger, no joy, only finality. This conversation is over. For a moment, he stood, frozen disbelief clouding his eyes. Then slowly he walked past me, his footsteps heavy against the floor. I closed the door behind him with a quiet click, sealing him out of my home, my heart, my future. Silence settled again, deep and complete. I leaned against the door, breathing in the stillness, and for the first time in years, I felt free, not just from him, but from the version of myself who once believed love meant holding on, no matter how much it hurt. I walked back into my kitchen, plated my dinner, and sat down. The food was still warm, and for the first time in a long time, it tasted like peace.